Today, we're digging into Food Discover, which is this huge encyclopedic collection of video scripts on the history and science of 10 major food categories. We're talking everything from pizza to hot sauce.
And massive is the right word. I mean, the research is just staggering, but that sheer volume is actually where the trouble starts. The real challenge here isn't the facts. It's the friction. It's trying to keep a viewer engaged with what is essentially a very long listicle.
That's it, listener fatigue. You can have the best facts in the world, but if the structure is just thing, then the next thing, then the next thing, the brain just, it tunes out. So the first big opportunity here is moving this away from a flat catalog format.
Right, because right now it feels a bit like reading a phone book of, well, delicious thing. I was looking at the pizza script, and it lists over 20 styles. You've got your Neapolitan, Roman, Chicago, Detroit, New York.
And they're just one after the other.
Exactly. It's comprehensive, sure, but there's no narrative thread pulling me from one to the next.
It gets even more disjointed in the hot dog section. I mean, we jump from the Alaskan reindeer dog straight to the Seattle bagel dog. Why?
Just because they're both in the Pacific Northwest, I guess?
Yeah, which is a geography lesson, not a food story. The transition feels completely arbitrary.
And that kills the engagement. So I think the fix is to stop organizing by geography or, whatever random association. We need to reorganize these entries by what you might call evolutionary pressure.
Or technique family.
Yes. We need to treat these foods like they're species in a biology textbook. How did one adapt into the other?
I love that species analogy. If you look at the pizza section again with that lens, the whole story changes. Instead of a list, you create a lineage. You start with Neapolitan. The script already has the details, the strict rules, the specific flour.
The wood fire, all of it. It's the ancestor.
Right. But then don't just jump to Chicago because it's famous. Jump to the first major adaptation. New York style. The script mentions the immigrant baker, Lombardi. He didn't make the crust wider just for fun.
He did it because New York workers needed a lunch they could fold and eat while walking.
That's the evolutionary pressure. The environment changed from sit-down Naples to commuter Manhattan, so the pizza evolved a handle, that foldable crust.
And you can keep tracing that. Detroit style. This detail is in the tech, but it's kind of buried. They used blue steel utility pans.
From the automotive factories.
Yes! It's perfect. You have a pizza adapting to the industrial resources of the Motor City. It's rectangular because that was the tool they had lying around.
If you group Neapolitan, NY, and Detroit together, you're not listing pizzas anymore. You're telling the story of immigration and industrialization through dough.
Which is so much stickier than just Detroit pizza is square. And I think this whole taxonomy approach would completely save the fish section too. That part was, it was a slog.
It was a bit dry, yeah. But the material is there to fix it. There's a clear divide in the research between fish we eat fresh and fish we preserve to survive. Just group them by preservation necessity.
Ah, that's good. So you pit the modern luxury of, say, farmed salmon against the historical heavyweights like cod and herring.
Exactly. The script mentions herring drove the economy of Northern Europe. But why? Only because they figured out how to pickle it to last through the winter.
So the hook isn't herring is a fish. The hook is how did humanity survive the dark freezing winters?
Right. You explained that the lack of refrigeration didn't just change the flavor, it dictated the entire culture. Salted cod, bacalao. That wasn't just a recipe, it was the fuel for Atlantic exploration.
It turns a biology list into a survival guide, and that works for hot dogs too. You mentioned the Seattle bagel dog. If we stop looking at geography and start looking at engineering solutions, that weird jump makes sense.
It becomes a study in the vessel. How do you hold hot meat without making a mess? You've got the standard bun. Then the corn dog. Why batter?
Portability, carnivals, sticks.
Right. Then the Seattle bagel dog. Why a bagel? Because the creator had a bagel cart and needed to use his inventory.
And the Idaho hot dog is stuffed inside a baked potato.
It's purely functional engineering. Every culture is just trying to solve the same problem with the materials they have. Frame it that way. And you're not just talking about sausages, you're talking about human ingenuity.
That actually leads perfectly into the second big issue. We're talking about why things exist, but the script is, really inconsistent about how deeply it explores that why.
This is the environmental determinism angle. The material shines brightest when it connects a food to the scarcity or abundance of its environment. But right now, it only does that maybe 30% of the time.
I noticed that. You get these great entries like John Duja in the chocolate section. It explains the British blockade, the cocoa shortage in Italy, so chocolatiers stretch their product with local hazelnuts, and boom!
Nutella is born out of war. It's a fascinating story of scarcity. But then you flip to California pizza, and it just says it uses goat cheese because that's California cuisine. It feels so shallow in comparison.
Just listing ingredients?
We need to anchor every single entry in that scarcity versus abundance framework. We need to ask, why did the local economy force this food to exist?
A great candidate for this is the burger section, specifically the Slug Burger from Mississippi.
The name alone just begs for an explanation.
It really does.
And the script gives one, but it misses the emotional weight. This was a Depression-era thing. Meat was expensive, so they took ground beef and cut it with soybeans or flour to make it less. It sold for a nickel, which was slang for a slug.
So it's a burger born of desperation.
Exactly. Now contrast that immediately with the Wisconsin Butterburger.
Which is just a monument to excess.
It is. Wisconsin is the land of dairy abundance. They aren't stretching meat to survive. They're drowning it in butter because they have more cows than people. You put the Slug Burger next to the Butterburger, you're not comparing sandwiches.
You're comparing economic realities. You're showing poverty and wealth through grease.
That adds so much more weight. And I think you can apply this to the noodle section. The script talks about the wheat versus rice noodle divide in China, but it frames it almost like a menu choice. Like, oh, Northerners prefer wheat.
As if they just walked into a supermarket and picked a pasta.
Right, but it's an agricultural mandate. The North is dry and cold, perfect for wheat. The South is wet and humid, perfect for rice. When Northern conquerors went south, wheat wouldn't grow, so they had to invent noodles made from rice.
They didn't want rice noodles. They were forced to make them.
It was an environmental mandate. The difference between lo mein and chow fun isn't just texture, it's climate data on a plate.
Speaking of climate, I have to bring up the ice cream section. The dondurma, the Turkish stretchy ice cream.
And bouza from Syria.
Yeah.
The script mentions they're chewy because of salep and mastic. This is my favorite example of this. The script treats the stretchiness like a novelty. But why did they add tree resin to ice cream?
Because it's hot.
It's incredibly hot in the Eastern Mediterranean. They didn't have freezers. Standard French custard would be soup in 30 seconds. The mastic and salep stabilize the structure, so it melts much, much slower.
So it's not just a treat, it's the ice cream that fought the sun.
That's the headline. If you write it that way, suddenly a viewer cares about orchid flower.
Okay, so that brings us to the mechanics of the food itself. We've talked history and environment, but the science in the script is a little lopsided.
It is. This is the third big opportunity. Standardize the science. The script occasionally drops some brilliant chemistry like explaining overrun in gelato, the amount of air whipped in, or the Maillard reaction in blonde chocolate. Those parts feel really authoritative.
But then you get to nuts or hot dogs, and the science just vanishes. It turns back into trivia. Did you know the hot dog was invented in? That's not science.
We need a food physics anchor for every category. We need to explain why texture or flavor works on a chemical level. Stop just saying spicy or crunchy and tell us what's actually happening.
So let's take hot sauce. The script mentions Scoville units, which is fine, but it's a bit basic. How do we deepen that?
We look at the delivery mechanism. The script mentions gochujang, which is fermented, versus something like Tabasco, which is vinegar-based. Don't just say one is deeper and one is sharper. Explain the chemistry. Tabasco is a vinegar suspension. That acidity hits the tongue instantly, delivers the capsaicin in a sharp, fast prickle.
Whereas gochujang has sugar, it has fermentation byproducts.
Exactly. It's thick. It coats the tongue. The heat binds differently to the receptors, and you get that slow build that lingers. You can contrast the sharp hit versus the slow burn through chemical absorption.
I like that. What about nuts? That section felt the most devoid of hard science.
The nuts section is just begging for a biological warfare angle.
Go on.
Nuts don't want to be eaten. The script mentions cashews has shells with urushiol, the same oil in poison ivy. That's why you never see a cashew in its shell. It's toxic.
That's a huge detail. It explains the entire processing method.
And Brazil nuts. The script notes they required this one specific bee to pollinate them, and that bee requires a specific orchid in an undisturbed rainforest. You can't really farm them.
So eating a Brazil nut is the result of this incredibly complex, fragile ecological web.
It is. It adds a layer of danger and complexity. You aren't just snacking. You are defeating a biological defense mechanism. That's the science anchor we need.
I want to apply that physics logic to texture, too. We talked about pizza. Detroit versus St. Louis. One is airy, one is a cracker.
This is where you bring that overrun idea from ice cream over to bread. Detroit style, high hydration dough in a pan. The water turns to steam, gets trapped, and creates huge air pockets. It's a foam of gluten. St. Louis style is unleavened, no yeast. Physically, it cannot rise.
So it's not just crunchy, it's a dense, crystalline sheet of starch.
One is a foam, one is a sheet. That elevates the commentary from a food blog to a food science class.
Okay, so we've got structure, environment, physics, but we still need to get people to click in the first place. Which brings us to our final point, the hook.
The myth-busting problem. The material has absolute gold on common misconceptions, but they're buried. I'd read half a paragraph before realizing, wait, everything I thought I knew was wrong.
Like the white chocolate entry, it mentions halfway down that it has no cacao solids, so it's technically just sweetened fat. Or the peanut entry, that they aren't actually nuts.
That can't be a footnote. That has to be the lead. The weakness here is structural. We need to invert the paragraph. Start with what the listener thinks they know and then correct it immediately.
So for the nuts section, instead of starting with, humans have gathered nuts for centuries, you'd go with what?
I would open with something really combative. Almost nothing in this aisle is actually a nut.
Okay, I'm listening.
Then you clarify. Peanuts are legumes, almonds and pistachios are drupes. They're seeds inside a fruit, like a peach pit. The only true nuts in the mix are probably the hazelnuts. You turn taxonomy into a revelation.
That is so much stronger. It creates an immediate information gap the viewer wants to close.
It works for history, too. Look at the pasta section. The script mentions the Marco Polo legend.
Which is the one story everyone knows.
And the script admits it's false, but it does it so politely. Later on, no. Start the spaghetti section by saying, forget Marco Polo. He did not bring pasta to Italy.
And then pivot to the real story.
The Arab traders in Sicily explained that dried pasta was an invention for desert travel, shelf-stable energy that just happened to flourish in the sunny Sicilian climate. You debunk the myth to tell the real history.
I think the most dramatic one is the pizza origin story. The script says tomatoes were considered poisonous.
That's the ultimate hook. The invention of pizza was an act of bravery. Why? Because for 200 years, Europeans thought tomatoes were poisonous nightshades, framing Neapolitan pizza not as just tasty bread, but as a culinary experiment by the starving poor who had no other choice, makes the origin story heroic.
It changes the viewer's entire relationship with the food. It's not a snack anymore, it's a risk.
And that is what keeps people listening through a 10-item list. They want to know what else they're wrong about.
So to pull this all together, Food Discover is sitting on a gold mine of information, but it's packed in a way that encourages skimming, not engagement.
We aren't asking for more research. The facts are all there. We're just changing the container.
Right. To recap, first, kill the list. Build an evolutionary narrative. Don't just jump city to city. Trace the food's adaptation from one environment to the next.
Second, use that scarcity versus abundance lens to explain why things exist. Tell us if a food was born out of famine or surplus.
Third, standardize the science. Apply food physics to everything. The texture of pizza, the defense mechanisms of nuts, make it consistent.
And finally, front-load the hooks. If you have a myth to bust, put it in the very first sentence. Grab them by the collar.
So we have a challenge for the listener. Take just one section, let's say pizza or ice cream, and rewrite it using these 4 lenses.
I would love to see the pizza section rewritten as an evolutionary tree of dough, starting with that poisonous tomato hook.
I think the difference in readability would be night and day.
We really look forward to seeing that revised draft. Send it over and let's see how this material evolves. Thanks for tuning in to The Critique.